All right, welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed lunch and our live taping of Flyout Day. Thank you so much for joining us, Senator.
You bet, good to be here.
All right, Jake, I'm gonna give it to you first.
And I'm sure as people filter in, they will take their seats, and I hope they do. You made news yesterday, you and a number of Senate Democrats, saying that you will continue to put war power resolution votes on the Senate floor unless the Trump administration commits to public hearings on their offensive in Iran, their war in Iran. Talk about that, and have you any indication that the administration is interested in doing hearings?
We're determined to use whatever tools we have in the minority to really compel the administration to come before the American people in a way they have not been willing, to answer questions under oath. And there are a lot of questions the American people have through their representatives. I'd like to know, for example, when the president talks about, well, maybe the map of Iran won't be the same map after this war is over.
I'm curious about that too.
What is he saying? What does he mean by that? When the president claimed that on the basis of what he saw, it was Iran, not the United States, that bombed that girls' school. What was he looking at, or was this a complete fabrication on his part? There have been so many endless rationalizations, justifications for why we're at war to begin with. How will we know when it's over if we don't know whether we've accomplished whatever goal we had at the outset? So we'll use whatever tools, and certainly the war powers resolutions are one tool. I wouldn't say, though, that would be the end purpose of the war powers resolutions. Ultimately, we want to bring this to an end. And I think depending on how long this drags on, those war power resolutions will only gain in support. I hope it will end long before it reaches that threshold. But nevertheless, we intend to use whatever tools we can to force a public debate and an accounting.
As a check on the president, if the White House sends up an Iran-related supplemental, which is, kind of another opportunity for Democrats, certainly, whether it's, for missile defense, regional force protection, or replenishing U.S. stockpiles, is there any version of that that you could support? Or is new money kind of a non-starter at this point?
I think new money for this war is a non-starter as far as I'm concerned. I would also say there's $150 billion of new money that's already allocated to the Pentagon in the one big ugly bill. So they've got plenty of money. What we don't have plenty of money for are things like disaster assistance.
Something California has wanted for a long time.
We have been pushing for more than a year to get the kind of assistance that states normally get after disasters, except we're living in this world now where if you're in a state that didn't vote for Donald Trump, then your disasters don't count, don't matter. Farmers need support. There are all kinds of unmet needs right now that ought to be the focus of a supplemental, but the Pentagon has plenty of money. And there are a lot of things that in the aftermath of this, we're gonna have to come to grips with that I think we have fallen down, we as a Congress and the Pentagon, and that is, even as we have been engaged in this war in Ukraine and understood how the nature of war has changed and the proliferation of these low-cost drones, we really haven't kept pace with the differing economies of scale. So what we're producing way too slowly. It's way too costly for the new kind of warfare that's being fought. And that's certainly something we're gonna have to invest in down the road. But I don't think you're gonna find much support among Democrats to fund a war that hasn't been authorized and that we don't support.
You've spent a lot of time when you were in the House and in your time on Capitol Hill on foreign policy questions, on intelligence questions. Is it your view that Trump has already crossed the constitutional line, or is the real test what he does next, how long this lasts, whether U.S. troops are drawn in deeper, whether there's boots on the ground, which, by the way, there's been reporting, not from us, but from other people, that special forces could be sent in to secure nuclear stockpiles or whatever they say they need to secure. Has he crossed that constitutional line yet?
For certain. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war, and while it doesn't define war, it also doesn't require that there be boots on the ground. And if there was any indication that that should not be the constitutional line, 7 service members have already lost their lives. You can lose American troops without boots on the ground, and we have. So that line has been crossed. At the classified briefing, I pointed out the Secretary of Defense, or the Secretary of War, as he likes to call himself, kept using the term war. Indeed, they're using the term war for what they call the 12 Days War, when they attacked Iran in June of last year. The president describes it as war. There's no mistaking what we are engaged in. So that line has been crossed. I think the reality is that for my Republican colleagues, the line keeps moving and moving and moving. So at one point it was, well, how intense is the commitment? What is the risk to troops? What is the duration of the conflict? And now some are articulating it as, there's no war unless there are boots on the ground. Well, I guarantee you, if the president puts boots on the ground, they will still claim the Constitution has not been triggered. They have abdicated to this president our two most important powers. We have two seminal powers in the Constitution. One is the power of the purse, which they've given away when they let the president impound money and rescind money. And they're giving away Congress's power to declare war or refuse to declare war. They might as well go home if they're not going to take seriously these two fundamental responsibilities.
So you've been one of the president's most aggressive critics for years. So I just want to ask you, like, bluntly, do you think this conduct is impeachable? Or do you think talking about impeachment right now is politically and constitutionally the wrong frame?
I think that any number of the president's acts, the massive corruption of this administration, potentially contains a multitude of offenses. I don't think it's viable to be pursuing an impeachment. We can't even pass a war powers resolution because the Republican Party in Congress is so much in the thrall or in fear of this president. So I'm focused on really what we can do. And what we can do is use the tools that we have when they need our votes, and use the tools that we have even when they don't need our votes to influence what takes place on the Senate floor, and use that leverage to try to bring about hearings, to try to bring about accountability, and ultimately try to bring about an end to the war. But I would leave to another day the questions of impeachment or other remedies.
So if Democrats take the majority in Congress, do you think there will be an impeachment effort?
Well, you know, I'm judging on what I hear from my House colleagues. It certainly sounds like there would have been one with Kristi Noem. You'll have to really ask my House Judiciary colleagues about that. But, you know, my view is in the Senate we ought to focus on what is achievable, what are the most powerful tools that we can use right now.
I want to ask you about, so the politics and the substance of this, which is, and the White House will say, and some Democrats will even say, we're talking about the war powers resolution, but we're not talking about what the president has done. He has taken out the Ayatollah, although there's now a new supreme leader, so maybe that argument is bunk. But is pursuing this regime a worthwhile policy goal? Was pursuing this regime a worthwhile policy goal for the Trump administration, for this country?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question, because my opposition to the war is not just the fact that the president violated the Constitution in initiating it without the approval or support of Congress, but also the rationale doesn't add up to me. I'm glad that Ayatollah Khamenei Sr. is gone.
Senior, right?
I don't know that I'm glad that Junior is now in his place, and the president at one point said, you know, the worst outcome is if we got someone worse than the Ayatollah. Well, he may have achieved that. The Ayatollah Jr. Had his parents killed, his wife killed, his daughter killed. That's not the start of a great relationship between Iran and the United States. So, as there was no imminent threat to our country, as the nuclear program had supposedly been obliterated, and even though it wasn't obliterated, they were still years away from the wherewithal to actually create a weapon. They were even farther away from the means of delivering it to the United States. So, yes, I'm glad the Ayatollah Sr. is gone. I won't mourn his loss. But if this doesn't result in any change for the Iranian people, then what have we accomplished on their behalf? And at such a terrible cost to ourselves in the loss of service members. We're spending about $1 billion a day in Iran, and that's money that could be used to improve people's quality of life here. I looked up this morning the average cost of building a hospital in America, depending on the size, about $100 million. So it's the equivalent of dropping 10 hospitals a day on Iran. That's 10 communities that don't have a hospital because we decided that bombing Iran was a better use of our money. I don't think it's a better use of our money.
It's a good segue, Anna, into our next questions.
All right, I want to shift gears a little bit. We asked Leader Schumer earlier for the 32nd case Democrats should make in the midterms. Give us your version. What is the one sentence voters should remember about a Republican Washington under Trump?
The economy is not working for you. Prices of everything are too high. And the reason they remain high, the reason the economy is not working for you, is because Donald Trump doesn't give a rat's ass about you. He only cares about his personal economy, and he's made more money in 1 year than his entire rest of his life put together. Both the positive case that we are going to laser-like focus on bringing down the cost of living, and the negative case, which is he hasn't done it, won't do it because he doesn't give a rat's ass. He thinks it's all a hoax because he can still play golf and he can still make his mega millions with his meme coins and his cryptocurrency. To me, the most powerful campaigns are the ones in which the positive message and the negative message are opposite sides of the same coin.
Democrats clearly, on those points, look very energized right now. I mean, we've seen polling, and, you know, make what you want of polling. It's like the weather, it can kind of change every day, but have a massive enthusiasm advantage. And we saw that in Texas last week, where more Democrats voted in the primary than Republicans. So what is the biggest mistake? I mean, what do you make of that poll? And obviously, I think you just addressed that, but what is the biggest thing that you're worried about between now and, you know, 200 and something, I think 237 days from now, which is Election Day 2026? What keeps you up at night about your own party's performance, not the country?
Well, these are two different things. Because what keeps me up at night is really not something the Democratic Party is doing or not doing. What keeps me up at night are the continuing and escalating threats to our elections themselves.
We were going to get to that as well, yeah.
The recent subpoenaing of records in Arizona, the FBI search in Georgia, the threats to nationalize the election, the president's advisors saying that they're going to deploy ICE or even the military at ballot boxes, the effort to stop all absentee ballot voting. The Republicans understand, as we do, that they're likely to get clobbered in the midterms. And this president has no unwillingness to engage in the most unethical, corrupt conduct in order to keep in power. We saw that in 2020 to the point of a violent insurrection. So that's what keeps me up again at night. I think left to voters' own desires at the polls, they'll be swept out. And the Senate map looks so much better than it did a year ago. Mm-hmm. And I feel very confident about the House. The Republicans feel equally confident they're going to get their head handed to them at the polls. And they seem willing to do anything, including subvert our democracy. So that's what keeps me up. In terms of the Democrats, I think we've gotten significantly better at two things that were really lacking in the presidential cycle. One is we've stayed more or less focused on the central concern for Americans, and that is the fact the economy is not working for them, that they're working harder than ever. And the problem isn't that they're out of work, although unemployment is now rising. The problem is they are working, and they still can't get by. And as long as we focus on that and make a powerful case that this is going to be our animating purpose, I think we will continue this streak of just extraordinary wins and a dramatic swing of the pendulum come November. The other thing that we're doing better is we were not communicating with people in a way that they would even hear our message if we had a good one, which we didn't.
Mark Cuban said you couldn't sell $1 for 50 cents. That was his line up here today. Not you specifically, but Democrats.
I'm sure I could sell one for 75. So, the problem we had in the last election was that we became the party of the status quo. And at a time when people are deeply unhappy with the status quo, that is a political death sentence. They are now the status quo. And as long as we are advocating change, and not just change, it has to be dramatic change, not incremental change. And we're focused on the change that's necessary to make the economy work for people in an era of globalization, automation, and increasingly AI, then we will do really well. But notwithstanding the lack of a message, even if we had a good message in the last election, we were not talking to people in the way they get their information. But we are making, I think, dramatic improvements, certainly as a Senate caucus, in our use of digital media, our interaction with podcasters, in going directly to voters in the way they consume information, which is not how they consumed it back when I was in college.
No.
So in both respects, I think we're doing a lot better.
All right, I want to shift to California. You are a California senator. Are you comfortable defending what your party did there, or do Democrats lose the moral argument on gerrymandering when they say we had to do it because they did it first?
I am very comfortable with what we did with Prop 50. And I say that as someone who, during the first year or two of the Biden administration, when we controlled everything, was making the case that our very first thing should be voting rights and doing away with the gerrymander on a nationwide basis.
Which California did for a minute. I mean, for not a minute, 10 years.
California did. It would have required us to overcome or do a carve out around the filibuster, but we should have done it. And I remember making the argument at the time that if there was something Mitch McConnell believed was existential to his party, let alone the country, and he controlled both House and Senate and the White House, he would have found a way to get it done. And we should have too. So I am a strong believer in a national redistricting reform that ends the gerrymander everywhere. And when we take back control of both houses and the White House, that will be, again, my first priority is to pass voting rights. I think, though, what we did in California was necessitated this downward spiral of states because of what the president did. And there will be true justice if at the end of all of these redistricting wars, they're worse off than before they began. But more than justice, what I would like to see come out of this is a public that is so fed up with all of this that there's finally the national will to pass a national redistricting reform so we put an end to this everywhere.
Until that moment when you control the White House, the House, and the Senate, and you're able to do that, to us, it seems like states are going to do this every cycle. They're just going to, if they don't like the map they have, I mean, Indiana didn't do it this time, maybe they'll do it next time. I mean, do you think that's what the case is now?
I think until we get a national reform, you're going to see even more dominoes fall.
Yeah.
Yes, Indiana might do it, and then New Jersey might do it, and then Illinois might do it. This is really not the road we want to travel down. And maybe it's too Pollyannish to think that both parties decide there's not a political advantage to this, or if it is, it's not clear who's advantaged, and maybe we just ought to do away with the whole thing. But I suspect that what it will take is the kind of massive national recoil, frankly, against this whole period we're going through, where voters demand something qualitatively different, better than what we're going through right now.
One of the key themes we've been talking a lot about is AI, big topic, obviously, in Washington. California has moved faster than Washington when it comes to AI, and now the fight is whether the federal government should block states from setting their own guardrails. Should Congress preempt states like California, or would that just mean no rules for years? What's your take on the role Congress should have here?
We shouldn't preempt certain basic protections that states want to put in place for the very reason you mentioned, which is we proved utterly incapable of regulating tech. If we moved with the same speed we have moved to deal with Section 230 or all the ills that have come about through social media, then we will never, it feels like, regulate AI. So before we tell the states back off, we have to show we're capable of doing something, and that hasn't happened. But if I can, on the subject of AI, and maybe this is anticipating your next question, what the administration is doing right now to Anthropic is so completely self-destructive. It's destructive of the AI in America, because this is one of the preeminent AI companies. It's even more broadly destructive of our national security, because they're a leader in this area, so they're going to undermine our own national security. But it is also just a direct assault on the whole idea of free enterprise. And I don't know why all of corporate America isn't screaming right now, except maybe that they're terrified. But if the President of the United States can pick an AI company and say, we're going to give you the death sentence because you dared insist on something that ought to be common sense anyway, then the administration can kill any company in America. And it can extort any company in America, and it's already extorted a great many. And the only way we stop this is if there is some collective action among corporate America, among our universities and our law firms and our media organizations that push back and say no. I admire what Anthropic is doing because, among other things, it is so exceedingly rare. How many companies are actually standing up to the president right now as he's trying to tell a company like Microsoft, you got to fire this person or we won't do business with you, or this person is on your board, Netflix, so that we're not going to support a merger. What kind of backward country are we becoming? And if corporate America thinks this is good for business, it may be good for a particular company in the very short term, but it is death to the economy in the longer term. And I wish we had more voices like Anthropic out there.
Are you surprised, on that note, I mean, are you surprised, a lot of these are public companies that are, you know, you mentioned Netflix, although they're out of that merger, but I guess more broadly speaking, are you surprised that public companies are not being punished by the shareholders or being otherwise, you know, punished in markets? I mean, if it is so bad, and listen, Republicans spent years saying we shouldn't pick winners and losers, and now that's what the Trump administration is doing, why isn't the free market punishing them?
Well, I was encouraged by the fact that when the administration took this extreme act against Anthropic, people suddenly moved away from ChatGPT and started buying Claude. There was a demonstrable impact on what people were downloading and what app they were using. So consumers are voting with their feet. And it may require exactly what you're saying, and that is shareholders to start initiating actions, and not just legal actions, but organizing around companies that are doing the right thing and against companies that are not doing the right thing. We are seeing it at law firms, for example, an exodus from firms that cut deals with the administration. You're seeing law students from some of the best law schools in the country decide they're not going to go to firms that cut deals. So you're seeing some of that, but it will probably require a lot more of that to ultimately change things.
All right, last question. When voters look at Washington right now, they see a government that often looks reactive, as we've talked about, whether it's tech, whether it's the war, AI. Why should they believe Congress is capable of getting ahead of any of this?
Well, their skepticism is sadly well placed and probably better placed when it comes to the whole issue of AI than any other. This is already having a dramatic impact on people's lives. New college graduates finding it more and more difficult to find entry-level jobs. It's going to transform the workplace, and given our poor track record in other areas of regulating tech, the public is right to be skeptical. The only thing that will overcome that skepticism isn't some argument I can make. It is, can we prove it? Can we actually get things done? Can we do things? There is a hunger for that. Mm-hmm. I ran for the Senate in a three-way primary with two wonderful colleagues. My message was very simple. We need to be able to get shit done. There is a lot of appeal to that idea. And I think people who embrace that and try to work in a pragmatic way to accomplish things will do very well in this environment, and those who don't won't.
All right, we are going to leave it there on Get Shit Done. Thank you very much, Senator Schiff.
That's our motto, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, sir.